Okay, welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. My name is Mangg. This is definitely going to be too loud. So in honor of the release of the first trailer for Doom: The Dark Ages, playing a little Doom Eternal.
The entrance to the BFG 10,000 is just across from this facility.
Yeah, I would say with that, Doom: The Dark Ages is now bumped up to like my most anticipated game.
The power source of the BFG 10,000 should be of interest to you as well.
If you haven't seen it, looks pretty sexy.
Warning, the Slayer has
It's
entered.
gonna be good.
Warning, BFG 10,000 is firing.
And other things that we got out of Summer Games Fest, Civ 7 announcements. Meh, you know, for me most of the time it's just like, if you don't even have gameplay, don't even announce it.
Warning, BFG 10,000 is firing.
So if you don't have gameplay, don't even announce it. And then I find it tough to get excited about stuff or like really be like, oh my god, I gotta look more into this. Oh man, I can't wait.
Is firing.
I don't really do that. Like when the game is out, let me know. I know I just said I was really excited about Doom: Dark Ages, but honestly, like I won't really think about it much until it's out. I'm just looking forward to it. What else was it?
Threat level at maximum.
We got another trailer for Monster Hunter Wilds. We'll see. I mean, I don't know how to really feel. I mean, I've looked at the trailers. The gameplay looks like it could be solid, you know. I haven't seen any wire bugs. And I do like that we get the mount, because I think that was probably the best thing about Rise, for me at least, was the mounts. So I'm glad they are continuing with that. But I do think they're also kind of continuing this trend of, I want to say casualification, but I don't know, it's hard to say, but like, you can have your mount like rescue you when you're like stunned on the ground or something and the monster's about to kick your ass. So
Warning, BFG 10,000 is firing.
I don't know. After Rise and how it was kind of disappointing for me, we'll just see. I'm not gonna like get super pumped for it. I know I'll just probably be disappointed because I was pretty pumped for Rise. The world was quite amazing.
Warning, BFG 10,000 is firing.
And then Rise was, I don't know, it just didn't click with me, and I still don't know, and I still don't have much interest in going back to it. One thing was the fucking Rampage mission. Just did not work for me whatsoever, and I don't want to play that game because I might have to do a Rampage mission again. I don't know, we'll see. There's probably some other things that were shown off that I was like, oh yeah, I'll probably play that.
Is firing.
But it's probably the big one. Other big release coming out this week, not this week, next week, is the Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC for Elden Ring. A few months ago, I was replaying through Elden Ring, and from the start, I was going for like 100%, you know? There's a mod you can get that just shows you every single thing you can get on the map, so you can really methodically go through it. So yeah, I was like 100%ing Elden Ring. I got up to the mountaintop of the giants or whatever, and then I kind of petered out.
BFG 10,000 is firing.
So I need to get back to that this week so I can... I don't know exactly where to stop.
Warning. BFG 10,000
for the DLC, but I'll probably stop, or I'd like to stop, I guess, right before the final boss battle. Pretty much as powerful as you can be in a normal game. If I'm overpowered for the DLC, I won't be upset. That's all I can say. God damn it, I still do that.
Warning. BFG 10,000 is firing.
So that's that. That's next week, though. So this week on this channel, we've got a little bit more RimWorld. I'm going to cool it pretty soon on RimWorld. Those that are done with that. I don't want to do that. Oh.
Warning. BFG 10,000 is firing.
And we also started something a little unusual. We started some solo role manging of Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Warning. BFG 10,000 is firing.
And I gotta tell you, I have a lot of those videos.
BFG 10,000 is firing.
Lego and I just last night started Abomination Vaults, but I have been playing the shit out of Abomination Vaults solo.
Critical damage.
No, stop that. Why is that? Why do I keep hitting that button?
BFG 10,000 is firing.
Yeah, I've just, at this point, I don't know, like 35 hours of footage of me playing through Abomination Vaults.
On the bridge.
So, is it good? Is it entertaining? I don't know. It's hard to say. I would say it's about as entertaining as me playing Fire Emblem. So if you like those, you'll probably like this to a degree. It's not quite as visual, I suppose, but not that much less visual than Fire Emblem when you're like skipping battle animations and stuff. It's pretty close. I'm gonna have to chainsaw something. You. God damn it. And so yeah, that's gonna be happening for a bit. And to replace RimWorld, though, I have some videos of a game that just came out recently called Scald Against the Black Priory, which is sort of like an Ultima throwback. This doesn't seem right. A bit of an Ultima throwback, like Ultima, 4 or 5 or something. And while I did experience those games a little bit. I don't really have any nostalgia whatsoever for them. But you don't need to. Scald, if you like kind of dark RPGs, turn-based stuff, it's really good. It's really good. So that's going to be a Let's Play. So Pathfinder and Scald, I don't know. I'm not done with Scald, so I don't know how long the game is. We'll see how that all works out. But then obviously there will be Shadow of the Erd Tree. And the estimate that I saw about it was 30 to 40 hours. And obviously, much like Elden Ring, we're going to be doing the whole thing. So yeah, should be good. I have not really looked at the latest gameplay trailers for it because I don't want spoilers. I want to see a boss for the first time when I encounter it, you know? Hey, the BFG 9000.
Should take you directly to the Mars surface facility.
Oh yeah, they kind of intend for you to do that. Wrong gun. Wrong gun. Fuck. There you go. So it'll all fit in somehow.
You can use the facility escape
Yeah.
pods to get down to the Mars core.
Even I am startled at how much Pathfinder I've been playing solo and that I'm enjoying it that much. But it's really just a fun tactical system. Fuck that. Over on the Exploring series, there's part 3 of 8 Ball. And this week I worked on part 4 of 8 Ball. The final part, for those that are not interested in it. And I can definitely see why some people would not be interested in it. It is very lengthy. It's, you know, sort of a comical, lighthearted article. There isn't really any horror elements whatsoever. You know, if you don't jive with the cast of characters and stuff, you're not going to get much out of it. And it's really more of a tale than anything. So, yeah, it's definitely very much modern SCP all the way. And I don't usually like comical stuff, but Harry Blank, his comical writing just, I don't know, it works for me so well. And I actually messaged, well, I messaged Placeholder first. Yeah, there's 4 authors on 8 Ball. So I messaged Placeholder first just because he showed up more recently in like my contacts on Discord. Because I was really struggling to like understand the ending and put it all together. And I just wanted one of the authors to like just summarize it for me so we can put this all together and I don't sound like an idiot at the end of the video. After 4 parts, it's like we kind of need a good conclusion here. So I messaged Placeholder first, and he's just like, I barely remember that. Ask Harry Blank. So I talked to him, and he gave me a really good summary. And then I was just like, okay, do you mind if I just quote you directly on this? And then he gave me a more quotable version. So that was really nice. Because he didn't really remember it all that well either. You know, these authors just go through article after article. And honestly, if you ask me to summarize an SCP that I covered like 6 months ago, I doubt I would remember much. So, yeah, at least we got a good explanation at the end. rather than just like, yeah, I don't really know, but put it together yourselves and enjoy. But next week we'll be back to just a single SCP video, single article, all that stuff. It's actually been on the polls for over a year now. Does that mean it's a bad article? No, but probably my log line didn't really sell it, you know. On Patreon, I have like a one-line description of the SCP, and sometimes it doesn't grab people. Oh, I'm definitely going somewhere. Oh, God. Yeah. So, I'm gonna try to hold off on multi-parters for a little bit, because we've had 2 of them in a row. And clearly, 8-Ball, not super popular. Views kind of down in the dumps for that series. So it'll be good. Just move on.
Access to surface gun bridge granted.
But I noticed that, like,
That is a weapon,
even the Volgan
not a teleporter.
isn't cracking 100K on his videos, even after, like, a couple weeks of them being up.
See Jessica in
So, what does that mean exactly? I don't know. SCP's a bit of a fad. Ebbs and flows, maybe. Possible.
blood drive. Be generous. Give your blood.
Do we have to wait around for another generation of kids to discover SCP? And then the animation channels will experience another boom, and then those kids will grow up a little bit, and it'll trickle over to the real content creators. I don't know. You know, SCP is not
Override loading sequence.
my life, so
3, 2, 1.
I certainly can move on, and I certainly will move on to some degree. But I probably won't really do anything out of the ordinary until, like, October. And then in October, I'd probably like to do at least a couple videos on Laird Barron's works. So I think that'll be pretty appropriate for the month and should be fun. Beyond that, we'll just have to see. We'll have to see how SCP views keep doing and all that. Because, I mean, the views for, like, 8-Ball now pretty much as good as 40K. So that's not great. Anyways. So yeah, my solo role-manging streams are on a bit of a hiatus right now. You know. It's kind of RPG overload with running for my family, playing it with Lego on stream, and playing it solo. So, but there'll be obviously a lot of solo role-manging being uploaded. It's just more Fire Emblem and less, like, freeform RPG. So speaking of which then, I had a session last night with my family. You know, we're playing 13th Age now. And last session, everyone was really happy with. Everyone really liked when I first introduced them to 13th Age. My sister especially really loved the system and how kind of freeform it was. And how, you know, they have some narrative control. It's not super strict. There's not a billion rules. So on and so forth. But then this week, I think it was a little more sour. I think it was more just like due to what they were doing rather than the actual system. Failed that. They started in the swamp, near some chewels, because they need to get 6 chewel eggs. Now, chewels, as presented in the 13th Age Bestiary, are fairly high level. They're actually level 6 large enemies. So they are not to be taken lightly. They're not for a low-level party. Certainly not level 2. The game really doesn't recommend throwing anything over 3 levels higher than the party. Just because the math kind of breaks down and it's not very fun. So I down-leveled the chewels to large level 4 enemies. And I threw in some chewel slaves, and I down-leveled them to level 2. And as far as I saw, it felt like the encounter was balanced, maybe a little tricky. But they've had a lot of easy fights, and I was like, okay, let's see how they handle something a little tougher. So it began with them trying to like formulate a plan, like how are we going to get these eggs, blah blah blah. And I don't know if it's just like they're kind of warped by my past stories. You know, like I said, I tell them stories from my RPG career all the time, and I became very obsessed, especially later on in my RPG days, of avoiding combat or circumventing combat. If I could achieve our goals through cleverness and, you know, intelligent planning and things like that, without getting into just a straight up fight where we roll initiative, then I was very pleased with myself. You know, that was my goal. And so I have all these stories then of like doing all these, you know, fun, awesome, clever things. The highlights, you know, of course. So that's really what you remember. You don't remember all the shitty times where you failed or whatever. I remember some of the shitty times. But, yeah, so I don't know if that kind of influenced them to feel like, oh, we should be avoiding combat. We should be doing clever stuff. Or if I started them with too much of, like, the OSR mentality. And sort of the OSR playstyle. Because we started with, like, Nave, you know? Where those systems, you know, combat is somewhat expected, but not like, it's not heroic fantasy. Like, you will absolutely encounter stuff. The world is a dangerous place, you know? Fuck. So you'll encounter stuff that will kill you if you just walk in for a straight fight. And I don't know if they just kind of got that impression too much, whereas now we're playing a very heroic fantasy game. I should probably just fall. Probably just use the fucking BFG. I'm not sure what it is exactly that has warped all their perceptions or given them this impression of RPGs, as they always have to come up with clever plans and ways to just circumvent things and just sneak in and grab something and run out or whatever, or something like that. And you know, maybe I can't really blame like the nature of this little campaign. Yeah, it's a scavenger hunt, and they're often grabbing stuff that's like protected by monsters, but that doesn't really mean that you have to run in and grab it and run out, or sneak in and grab it and sneak out. But anyway, so they're approaching the Chuuls. They're a couple hundred feet away, and they're kind of spying the situation. And when they had done their initial scouting, they'd actually seen a couple Chuuls here by these eggs. But now they don't see any Chuuls. They only see these humanoids, these Chuul slaves. And they're not really sure what to make of these things. So they spend a lot of time just sitting there and trying to think of like what's going on, how do we get those eggs, what should we do? You know, they've got a couple like teleportation magic items now that they could maybe use, but they're really not good at just kind of tabulating what everybody can do. I think that's part of it. They just can't get a grasp on everyone's potential. And again, part of that is they have one character that's a spellcaster, a wizard, and I don't think he's really grasped the capabilities of the rituals, which is where most of like your freeform out of combat potential comes from as a spellcaster. Being able to just declare how you use some magic spell to do some sort of crazy big effect. The real problem is that even if I do explain it, and I have explained it, but even if I really am clear and say like, okay, I mean, just if he doesn't have choices listed on a piece of paper, he's not really going to think of stuff. Some people just aren't that creative and imaginative, you know? So I could say like, hey, you know, you could use like a disguise self as a big ritual, and if you spend enough time and maybe get some resources and stuff, you could cast this big ritual and maybe disguise the whole party as like a bunch of goblins. You could sneak into the goblin camp. And that's not going to be written anywhere in any book. Okay? That's entirely just player creativity combined with GM fiat. And really, 13th Age is a very flexible system, you know? If the players come up with a cool, fun idea, the GM should just kind of go along with it, because it's a cool, fun system. That's the whole idea. So you're never going to have a list of things. This isn't Pathfinder, you know? And in some ways, you know, multiple of my players would probably do better in Pathfinder just because everything is kind of laid out. There's just kind of rules and restrictions for everything. There's hundreds of spells, you know. But, how did I lose my mouse here? What the hell? Okay, I lost mouse look there for a second. The problem is also that they don't read books, and they're not going to read all their options. So, yeah, that doesn't really work either. So I don't know what to do with them. As I said last week, I never know what to do with these people. So anyways, they're near the tools. They're trying to think of stuff. And they go back and forth for days on end. Like, okay, what do we do? How do we get these eggs? How do we sneak in? How do we use our teleportation? They ask Ray what to do. Because they're desperate. They're just desperate for someone to just give them a clever plan. And they'll just be like, yes, all right, perfect, let's do that. They don't have a single person like that. And so eventually they're just like, okay, let's just sneak up closer, because I think they had some sort of plan involving like teleportation, or I think my brother-in-law was gonna try and like sneak all the way around to go behind the eggs, behind this big tree, something like that. So they start sneaking in, and then my sister suddenly just like stands up and shouts and is like, "Remember what he said last week? These things like to ambush. They're gonna ambush us. This is just a distraction." You know, these humanoids. They're just a distraction. We gotta split. We gotta scatter. So they all start scattering in different directions. And I was like, I mean, I knew I was going to ambush them. Obviously, the tools were waiting in ambush. They were hiding. They're intelligent creatures that do like to lay ambushes. I had said that last week, which is another problem, that they almost never remember anything from week to week. Like, basic plot points. Even just today, we were all here for, like, you know, a cookout. And we were talking about D&D from yesterday, and they forgot where they are now, like the end of the session, like how they ended up. That's sort of what we're looking at here. So I was gonna ambush them. I just wasn't sure exactly when it would take place.
Calculating thrust. Launching in 3.
You know, it's a fluid situation, which is maybe unfair, but it's a fluid game.
Prepare for turbulence.
So they all scattered and split up, and I was like, well, this seems quite perfect. So I sent 2 tools after like a group of 3 of them, you know. And it's like, okay, I mean, that's pretty bad, because the tools, you know, we're gonna roll initiative, and the tools are gonna be right on top of 3 of them, and you know, the rest of the party is going to have to spend their first turn in the combat kind of like regrouping and rallying around the others, so they all get back together and bunker up and blah 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 and deal with the tools. No, that's not what they did. Many mistakes were made in that fight. So first of all, I don't actually, I rarely place things on the battle map now. I kind of just let them place stuff, which you'd think they would really abuse to their own advantage. Like, oh, okay, well, let's put this here and blah, this. But no, they really don't have any thoughts of that. So they screw themselves over more often than not. So they put the 2 tools right next to my mom's character, a ranger, an archer ranger. I'm like, okay, well, you put it there, so sure. So the 2 tools just start unloading on her the first turn. They go first. But they don't roll exceptionally well, and I don't fudge it, so it's just like, okay, you know. She gets hit a little bit. Like, clearly just like a demonstration of their power. It should have been a little worrying for them. Okay. My mom's turn goes. Instead of disengaging and like moving back and shooting her bow and just trying to get some distance between these crab creatures and her so someone else tankier can come in and engage them, No, she decides to just pull out her sword and go toe-to-toe with 2 Chuls as an archer. Empowered Dread Knight. Perfect. And it fell off. Well, we got a fucking BFG, right? Problem solved. She goes toe-to-toe. 2 Chuls. And she makes her attack. I think she missed. No, maybe she actually hit. I think she might have actually hit. I think she did like 10 damage to one of them out of their 90 health. Okay. And again, like, they're not weak, but they're not, like, insane. I didn't keep them at their original stats. They're beatable. This fight should be winnable if they work together. And then... you know, that was her standard action for her turn. So then, she could use her move action to try and disengage. Honestly, if nothing else, she could have just walked away from them, which would have been probably smarter. She would have taken an op, but it would have been just a single basic attack, whereas normally they get 2 attacks. So, all in all, probably better for her to just walk away and let someone else come in. But she doesn't even try and disengage. She doesn't even try and walk away. She literally just stands there and ends her turn. Despite us kind of explaining to her that, like, you have a move act, you can just try and disengage. No, just ends her turn, stands there with the tools. Okay, I mean, that was not a good start. Not a good start. I think Lego goes at some point, he's playing a paladin, he tries to, like, he was on the other side of the map, so he spends his whole turn, like, rushing over there. Smart. I mean, that really was the best thing to do, obviously. As I said, the best tactic there was to just regroup and bunker up behind your tanks and kill these fucking creatures. So he did what he was supposed to do. Cannot fault. My brother-in-law, however, the one who said that he was going to sneak around behind the trees to steal the egg, rather than abandoning that plan because your team is in trouble and desperately needs your help as a frontline fighter, he decides to continue with his plan and starts taking the eggs. Now, I probably should have had him roll a stealth. But honestly, I was treating it more as like an auto fail. Because he's a savage class, one of the kind of third-party classes. So he's a savage, big 2-handed sword, like heavy armor kind of stuff. And his plan was to rush out, grab 2 eggs, put them in a sack, and then rush back behind the tree. To me, that all spells auto fail for any sort of stealth and trying to be sneaky. I don't know if there's an expectation of stealth in that situation. Maybe. Anyways, so I had one of the Chuls still waiting in ambush near the eggs. So, like, there even if you were extremely sneaky, you'd have to be fucking supernaturally sneaky, like invisible kind of sneaky. Because this thing was specifically protecting the eggs. It was watching the eggs. And it was also, it has these Chul slaves there, the humanoids, that it communicates with telepathically. So the Chul slaves go after him, and I'm like, okay, this is going to seem kind of dickish, but there is a reason for it. And I had the three slaves kind of turn around and go behind the tree and attack him. The slaves weren't paying attention. They're practically mindless. But the Chul there is very intelligent and was watching the eggs directly. So, you know. And I did explain this afterward. So he starts getting ambushed then by the three Chul slaves and the Chul that then emerges the next round and goes after him. Meanwhile, my mom's character goes down from the next round of the Chuls, still wailing on her because she didn't disengage or do anything.
Oh, great powerful one, a sign of truce.
And, I think my brother-in-law was about to go down or did go down. I'm not quite sure, but I explained to them the fleeing rules for 13th Age, where if the party all agrees, there's a consensus, they can decide as a group to just flee the battle, and they all survive. They just escape, you know, narratively, they just get out of there, and everyone survives, even if they're, like, about to roll their last death save or something like that, you know. They get out of there. But, as a consequence, they suffer a narrative loss. And they did not know what that meant, so I had to spell it out for them very clearly. It's like, okay, if you flee this, you're not getting the eggs. They had argued that, like, oh, well, we'd already grabbed... They started, like, just grabbing eggs. Mid-battle, they're just like, just stuff them in your sack and we'll flee. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. If you flee, you do not get the eggs. You will fail this mission. And the book's pretty clear that, like, you fail in a way that coming back and killing the monsters later will not solve, you know? So they just will not get eggs. They will not get Chul eggs in this campaign, is sort of the narrative loss here. Because there has to be a loss. They all get to survive, they all get to keep their characters. You know, everyone's happy for that, but there has to be a big consequence. And they decided that was worth it. None of them really liked to die. So they all fled. And they had grabbed 6 eggs, which is what they needed, but I was like, okay, 3 of them break, you know, in sort of the scuffle and the flee, you know, the escaping. In your bags, they get kind of crushed. Rather than them lose all of the Chul eggs. So they got 1 Chul egg that contains like a baby Chul, or like a zygote, or I don't know, what do you call it? A fetus? I ain't no biologist. And then the other 2 Chul eggs actually contain magic items, 'cause that's what Chul eggs sometimes contain, which is why people like to steal them. And so Chuls are very protective of their eggs, because people like to steal them. And so they saw a couple, like, objects inside of these eggs. And I figured they'd be very tempted to bust them open and get some magic items. But they decided that they would rather hand in to Artemis at the end here 3 eggs rather than no eggs. Or, you know, 1 egg. So they decided they weren't going to do that. They weren't going to touch it. And that was that. They also, they asked about the broken eggs in their bag and what those contained. And one of them also contained a magic item that was just like, you know, Chul magic items are like all these like kind of fleshy, you know, body horror kind of things you strap to your body and like sort of integrates with your spinal system, you know, your nervous system and stuff. Which, yeah, is certainly pretty terrifying for players, I would imagine. So I can't say I'm too surprised that they didn't strap it onto their spine. Fuck you. What? I don't get it. So yeah, it was by far like the worst possible way they could have handled the Chul situation. I had balanced the math and everything so that they could just walk in there and say, Chuls, go fuck yourself, and get into a fight, you know. It was balanced for that. Had I kept the Chuls at their original strength, like, okay, sure, I am expecting you to be creative here and come up with a creative solution, otherwise you will die. In a straight fight, you will die. That's not what 13th Age is. Not, like, this is just heroic fantasy. So yeah, I mean, none of them were very pleased with it. Because they felt like their characters were weak because they just got destroyed in that battle without really thinking like why they lost. They, you know, they didn't lose because their characters are weak. They lost because they had no tactics whatsoever. They had negative tactics. No tactic would have been just walking in. They had tactics that actively made the fight worse. Anyways, they moved on. They headed up the mountains because they want to get these crimson mountain lilies that grow up there in a special valley. So we did another montage to cover their trip up the mountains and sort of the various obstacles that they encounter on their way up. I like this montage mechanic. But they definitely struggle. These are not creative people. And you're gonna have to be a little creative in this sort of group storytelling. You can't be one of those people that just sits there and rolls their dice during combat and doesn't say anything. Like, this demands some level of interactivity and creativity. And I said that, like, if I were playing with, like, a group of 10-year-olds, they probably would do better on the montage mechanic than my family. You know, the adults. Because kids are creative. They'll say, you know, crazy creative stuff that's just kind of silly. But the montage mechanic here is inherently a little silly. Because there's no dice rolls and really anything can kind of happen. So they started to kind of get it. But, you know, I went with my mom first of like, okay, what sort of obstacle do you guys encounter? She says, oh, we find this unclimbable cliff that we, you know, have to... We can't get up it. It's like, you know, one of those sort of cliff faces where it goes, like, horizontal, you know, and you have to, like, climb across it horizontally. And so then it's like, okay, next up is the halfling barbarian. How do you specifically help the group overcome this? And it's like, I think her first answer was like, we find a trail around so we don't have to go up it. And it's like, oh my god. I mean, that's like such a lame thing. No one is excited whatsoever by that. And the whole point of the montage mechanic is to highlight and put a spotlight on your character and how you are awesome and heroic and solve this thing for your group. I think it's harder the more players you have, I will say, because for one setting, you know, each player going around the table has to come up with something new and fresh. So I do think it's easier when you have like 3 players. But yeah, I mean, I was just like, no, that's just not as bad as that response is, you know, of we find a trail to go around. The problem was also quite lame to hand, because you go in clockwise order. So it's like, okay, you know the problem you're coming up with is going to be handed to the halfling barbarian. You could be a little nicer and say that you encounter like a giant, or, you know, that it can just cleave its head off, or, you know, something like that. Something that the barbarian could heroically solve. So we went back, I'm like, okay, come up with some other obstacle. And then, you know, she was really stumped. And then my nephew was like, oh, I have something, go to me. And I'm like, okay, let's go to you. And then he didn't have anything, and he was just like, So it's like, why did you say anything? And then Lego was like, I have something, go to me. So, okay, we'll start with Lego. So he said that there's just like, we find this mountainside section that has just like 100 some mountain goats climbing all over it. And then, so we go to my brother-in-law, and I'm like, okay, how does your character solve this for the group? And he's just like, I pull out my sword and I just start cleaving off goat heads. And my sister just starts like shrieking in anger, because her whole character, her whole identity is all about just being friends with every single animal we come across. And here he is just slopping off goat heads. And I'm like, nah, well, you can't really argue. I mean, whatever he says kind of goes. This is his moment. That's the montage. And then, his obstacle that he came up with then was that the goat corpses are like falling down around them, you know, around his companions off of the mountain and threatening to just knock them down. And that's the obstacle that he hands to his wife, who is fuming about all the goats dying. So it went on from there, and it got a little better. You know, they encountered like, they did encounter a giant in the end that the wizard shrunk down to a tiny size or something like that. And again, I'm not sure exactly the rules, like how creative you're allowed to be. I feel like they went with a very extreme example in the book, and I feel like they went with that example for a reason. The example in the book included, or in the rulebook, included them encountering a group of hill giants in a tower, and the one character just says that he kills them all. You know, he says it with a bit of a flourish, but the end result is he just kills them all. And then they move on with all the giants dying. No rolls, no nothing of any kind, just, yep, solo, a whole bunch of hill giants. And it just seems like this really weird bit of, like, dissonance. Because if we go into combat, that character can't solo a whole bunch of hill giants. I assume, I don't remember what level they are in the example, but I assume not. Or if he could, it wouldn't be painless. Like, he would be feeling it afterwards. Not just, yeah, I slaughter them all. So, it's kind of this weird dissonance, because afterwards, they actually did encounter a giant during a non-montage, and they were like, oh, well, can't you just shrink it again? It's like, well, no. You know, can't you just solo all these giants again? You just did it. So, I don't know how I feel about that. I like the montage concept, in theory, of just kind of hand-waving a bunch of stuff. But I don't know if it should break your capabilities that much, you know? It's a chance for you to be cool and heroic, but, like, there is a limit, right? You can't just say, oh, like, I swing my axe and I break the mountain in two and it collapses and causes a giant earthquake that kills all the dragons that ever have existed. Or something. I don't know. Just something insane. It's like, well, no, you can't do that. And it's like, okay, where's the line? Where's the fucking line? And that's confusing, I think, for GMs and players. Again, it's all meant to just be narrative. It has no consequences of any kind. You don't really get anything out of it. And you don't really lose anything out of it. But then at the end of the day, it's like, what's the point, really? And it just creates this dissonance that's confusing, especially for, like, first-time players. I mean, yeah, just imagine, like, you're playing with, like, younger players. Say you're playing with, like, 13-year-olds or something. I don't know. Doesn't even matter. You could be playing with adults. It doesn't really matter. And you do this montage mechanic. It's their first time playing RPGs. And you explain the montage mechanic. And they're going around the table and they're just, like, slaughtering stuff and doing all these crazy feats, you know, because it's a montage. And they're racing through a dungeon and just, like, yeah, and there's, like, 20 skeletons in this room. And I just start bashing them and there's bones flying everywhere and this big massacre. And I stand on the top of this pile of bones and I roar in victory. And it's like, all right, yeah, that's awesome. And then we get to the final battle and there's like 4 skeletons and it's like, fuck, he's killing me. What the fuck? You know, it's like, because no, you can't just solo 20 skeletons in combat. That would be insane. The whole encounter balance would just destroy itself. It would implode. That's really confusing, I think, for a player. And it's all well and good to just say, like, okay, well, you know, there's just a big difference between what we do in montages and narrative moments like that and when we get down to combat. It's fine to say that, but that's also not very satisfying. Am I a big fucking awesome badass hero or not? Why? You know, it's like, okay, during montages, I eat my spinach, I guess, and I power up, but then afterwards, it's like, okay, I guess I'm not that cool. Ho-hum. I don't know. So I like the idea of montages, but I don't know, I feel like I might have to tone it down from that. That just seems a little too much. But again, where's the line? I don't know. I don't know where to tone it down. It's like, oh, you encounter a hill giant. Now, your character couldn't solo a hill giant in a fight. Can he solo one hill giant in a montage? Maybe? Possibly? You're already at a disconnect, but maybe 2 hill giants. Oh, well, that's starting to push it. 3 hill giants. Oh, no way. I mean, how could you allow that? I don't know. I don't really know what to make of that. It's something that I'd like to just sit down with, like, the designers and really just have, like, a discussion about that. It's an optional system. I mean, you don't have to do any montages. But like I said, I like the concept. So it'd just be nice to put a pin on it a little better. Because you look at, like, yeah, there's a handful of kind of narrative abilities like that in the system. Like the swashbuckler talent for rogues that lets them just kind of do one badass stunt in the middle of a fight. You know, where you're, like, swinging on a chandelier or you're jumping off of the enemy's heads or running along their shoulders or, you know, any sort of cool action movie stunt. You know, you can just do that once per battle. And I think that's really cool. And also does not create a huge disconnect because you're not soloing the fight. The stunt isn't going to be like, oh, I rushed through and I slit all the enemy's throats and they're all dead. It's like, well, nope. Don't be a dumbass. That doesn't happen. You know, it's a stunt. It's something cool and exciting that you know, might include an attack, and probably does include an attack of some kind, but it's still an attack roll, not I slit everyone's throats. You know, at the end of the day, you're still rolling your attack plus 6 or whatever and rolling 2d8 damage, or, you know. So that, I think, is just outlined kind of better. And then there's rituals, which are very freeform and can accomplish, theoretically, just about anything, but the GM gets to decide, like, how much time it takes, how much resources are involved. If I want to use a spell to blot out the sun, I can do that, but it'll probably take, like, 100 years of preparation and just an insane amount of the rarest ingredients known to mankind. And it's just, like, kind of outside of the scope of this campaign, unless the whole party's like, yes, let's do this. Let's spend the next 100 years preparing. We're going to blot out the sun. It's like, all right, I mean, if that's what the group fucking wants, who am I to argue? And that becomes, like, the campaign for some weird reason. Maybe not blot out the sun, but, you know, something more beneficial that just is just a massive endeavor. Yeah, why not? Make it the campaign. But montages just fit in this weird category of I don't know exactly what to make of it. The first time I read that, of just like, he kills a bunch of hill giants and there's no roll, and it's like, what the fuck is this? Just breaks every rule of D&D. Anyways, I want to finish up the session. So they're up the mountain now, and they come across the valley where these flowers grow. Very rare flowers grow only in this valley. And they find that in the valley live a whole bunch of goblins. It's a big goblin village, like 180 goblins in there. And in the middle of the valley is this little patch of grass, you know, where the flowers grow very prominently. And near that little patch where all the flowers grow, there's like a makeshift throne. And sitting on the throne is a young hill giant, kind of drinking from a giant mug. And he seems to be like the leader of these goblins. And so then what followed was like 25 minutes of them coming up with every plan that they can think of how to get these flowers. And obviously I did not plan for them to charge in and start fighting 182 goblins and a hill giant. Had they done so, I still probably would have run it somewhat fairly for them. I would have just done like 5 waves, you know, of goblins, and most of them would have just been like mooks that they could have just started cutting through. And eventually the goblins would have just been like, what the fuck do you want? And, you know, started just running and just in terror if they cut through enough of them. Like, it still would have been a somewhat tough but fair encounter. It wouldn't have been like, okay, 100 goblins surround you and start stabbing you. You know, it would have been somewhat balanced, because that's the idea of the system. It's not really simulationist. It's not a simulationist system, obviously. And then they would have had to fight the hill giant, of course. So it would have been a kind of a tough gauntlet, but potentially doable if they were a little lucky and good. Had they walked in and tried to talk to the hill giant, said, look, we're here for these flowers. We need to save the world. Please, you know, you're great and mighty and powerful, but we would love if you would just be gracious and give us some of these flowers. We just need 3 of them. You know, had they tried that approach, and they would have been polite enough and kind of humble enough before this giant, because giants think very much of themselves, he would have potentially given them the flowers had they gone and done a task for him, because he wants a rock egg. Okay, because he wants a pet rock, you know, one of those giant birds. So up on the highest peak of the mountain, you know, in a little cove, there's a rock, and it's got some eggs. So he wants one of those eggs to be brought to him. And I probably wouldn't have run it as a montage. I'm not sure. If they had a clever idea of getting the egg, I doubt it. But if they had a clever idea, you know, we would have done it that way. Where they try and get this egg. Because if you recall, in my solo campaign, when I was like level 2 on my first character. I fucking captured a live griffin. So a group of 6 adults should be able to get 1 egg, but, you know, who's to say? So they could have gone in guns blazing, they could have gone in diplomatically and done it that way. And yeah, stealth is always an option as well. They spent, like I said, like 25 minutes just discussing primarily different stealth approaches. Or they talked about like sending using Featherfall or something to send someone in, and then she would grab the flowers and then use her teleportation helm to teleport out. Or there was talk of like starting fires in the huts as like a distraction, and then someone sneaks in and gets them. And ultimately it came down to using my sister's ferret. And it's really tough because my sister is like the most kind of active person at the table most of the time. She's the most vocal, and she's all about animals. Every character she's ever played has been the same kind of Beastmaster thing. She loves the Beastmaster movie. She's all about talking to her animals and getting them to do stuff for her. And so they're starting to just like solve every problem now by using her animals to send them in. And it's really like, I don't want to crush her spirits, but a lot of what she's doing is just kind of against the rules and just breaking the rules. She has 1 animal companion, her wolf, and then she has 1 pet, which is like a familiar, which is her ferret. And one of the things that you can get for your pet is that once per arc, so once every 3 or 4 battles, it can scout ahead to like, you know, check out what's ahead of you. That's what it can do. And then she's got like a hawk, and I had to say, like, okay, well, the hawk is not a pet. It doesn't have any special abilities. It's just like a trained hawk. So first they tried to just send in the hawk, which I think she had changed to an eagle because eagles can lift more. I think they wanted to use the eagle to like steal the eggs from the Chuuls initially. That didn't really work out. So now, okay, we'll just send in the eagle and it'll grab 3 of the flowers, you know, in its like talons and its beak, and it'll fly back out. And I shouldn't have even allowed it, but I was like, okay, I mean, let's roll a d20 just to see how it goes. And she rolls poorly, so it takes like an arrow in the wing and doesn't get any. So, okay, well, we'll just send in the ferret. And the ferret will sneak in at night and be really sneaky and grab 3 flowers and then sneak out. And it's just like, what are we doing here? Why? Like, who? Ugh. Outside of my sister, like, who enjoys this? Who likes just sitting there behind a rock while a bunch of animals solve all your problems? No one protests this or anything. So they send in the ferret, and she rolls okay. So I'm like, okay, it gets the flowers, but it's being chased by a bunch of goblins. So my mom, she's got the helmet of teleportation I gave her, which she can use once per arc. So she grabs, and that's a funny thing, is like they have all these arc abilities, and I've explained numerous times that the only way to refresh these things is to do battles. And they're still just like doing everything they can to avoid battles. So she grabs the ferret and she teleports like way off into the distance. I should have set a distance limit, but I find it's more fun if it's just anywhere you can see. Because she teleported just blindly, very quickly, way off into the distance into like a nest of hellbugs. Because I love hellbugs. But she just, yeah, she ran out of there. She took some damage, blah, blah, blah. So they reunited and they started going over their other options. They started looking into the Amalthean goat because they need like goat milk, and then that led to another big discussion about where they should get an Amalthean goat. And then they were like, fuck the goat, we're not interested in the goat because the goat milk only is fresh for 2 days, so they'll have to actually steal the goat itself to take it to Artemis. Which, yes, that was my plan. They started coming up with, like... They were like, well, is there any way that we can make it last longer if it's fresh? You know, and keep it fresh for longer. And I'm like, not that you're aware of. I mean, people have tried this for centuries, trying to come up with different ways to keep it fresh, because it's really restorative milk. It's very coveted, it's very rare. People that have an Amalthean goat keep that goat, like, in their family or something, or in their, like, elite clubs, for decades and decades, as long as they can, because it's really rare. So they said screw the goat, and they're like, okay, well, we can get dragon scales, because they remembered that there was a dragon back in Thunder Tree. So they went all the way back to Thunder Tree, near Phandalin, near their end goal, and they decided to pop in at the druid there, because they had, you know, made friends with the druid in Thunder Tree. So they pop in, and they find him nailed to the fucking wall in his home, with the symbol of a dragon head carved into his chest. And yeah, they were quite upset because they liked the druid, and my sister's like, I'm gonna murder all those cultists. I'm gonna murder every one of them. She became like, you know, fucking Liam Neeson or something. It was scary. Because they all knew that it was the cultists that did this, and they had spared the cultists because at the time, you know, Lego playing the paladin was like, well, they haven't done anything wrong. They have not broken any law or anything like that, so I really can't justify striking them down. And, but sure enough, I mean, this was the natural result. They're trying to make friends with the dragon and ally with the dragon and serve the dragon. And there's a druid on the other side of the town that is devoted to kind of sealing the dragon away and not letting the dragon flourish, so to speak. Whether he wants to kill it or not, he probably didn't want to see it dead, but he certainly didn't want to see it free and corrupting the land and doing what it wants to do. So, you know, death or captivity, either way. So naturally they killed the druid because they hoped then that his report wouldn't go out and no one would know what's going on in Thunder Tree. Now, of course, the party was... the party had sent the Hawk along a couple weeks ago to go to Staunton with a message carrying the druid's report about the dragon here, so that his order would send their people to deal with it. And it was like so close to getting to Staunton. But then at the start of the session, my sister was asking about her hawk, and she's like, oh, well, we need my hawk, because they were trying to have the hawk steal the eggs, remember, from the Chules. So they're like, we need my hawk. So my hawk knows that I'm in distress, and it just shows up. And I'm like, okay. I didn't remind them what it was doing. I mean, they knew what it was doing, but I guess they didn't really think about had it reached there or not. And it was very close. Very close to Staunton. But it knew that she was in distress, so it swooped back. So no, the report never made it. The druid's dead. And that's all no good. But now they're in Thunder Tree. And they're going to kill the cultists, and then they're going to kill the dragon and get the scales. And then... I don't know if they're going to do anything beyond that, other than just maybe waiting around for the ritual to occur and the big climax. But yeah, we'll see. So... The big climax that's going to end out the campaign, it's going to be a big gauntlet of battles. There's going to be hellbugs, there's going to be demons, maybe some other things that I might come up with. And it's just going to be a series of battles as Artemis channels the ritual and they have to protect him. So he'll kind of have this bubble around him, and they'll have to make sure that no enemies start beating on the bubble and disrupting the ritual, and there's going to be some fun surprises, and then, you know, Artemis is there to kind of maybe buff them or support them or something if things go really badly, because I don't want them to TPK during this battle. Ideally, you know, they win by the skin of their teeth, sort of thing. But we'll see. Yeah. I hope that they don't just, like, sit there and trying to come up with ways to avoid the battle. It's like, no, please just do the fucking battle. Please. Yeah, I don't know. But then we'll start a fresh campaign, and I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it yet. Eyes of the Stone Thief is like the 13th Age campaign, and listed often as one of the best campaigns ever. So I may look into doing that, but I think that starts at level 4. So I'd still need to come up with some things for levels 1 through 4. Yeah, I don't know. But hopefully I can impress upon them that just, like, this system is sort of designed for you to just do battles. And that doesn't interest everybody, I understand that. And it's not like you have to fight everything you come across. But if you're really struggling and sitting there for 20 minutes, it's just like, just go and do the fight. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, enough talking. So, more Pathfinder, 2nd edition. Plenty more of that coming. Some Scald against the Black Priory. And the final part of 8 Ball coming tomorrow. But for now, my name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. And I'll see you fine folks next week.